Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this, an American F-16 flying over the Red Sea. It's one of our most advanced jets.
Right.
And suddenly, around 9:47 a.m. local time, near the coast of Yemen, bang, 2 Houthi missiles launched right at it.
And not just the F-16, there's an MQ-9 Reaper drone nearby too, supporting it.
Exactly. And the weapon system. An SA-6, we're talking missiles that can hit Mach 3. Serious stuff.
It really is. I mean, what stands out immediately is just the boldness of it.
Right.
The Houthis, they've been a problem mainly hitting shipping, sometimes drones. But this, targeting a high-value U.S. combat jet, that's a big step up.
Huge step. It signals a real potential shift in their game plan, doesn't it?
It certainly feels like it.
And you have to think about that pilot in that split second.
Absolutely.
Our sources say quickly actions, flares popping, countermeasures going wild, and then this incredibly steep dive. Drop from 30,000 feet down to 15,000.
Wow, that's a serious evasive maneuver. Shows how close it must have been.
Razor-thin margin, like you said. It could have ended very differently for America. Thankfully, both the F-16 and the drone got away clean.
Thank goodness.
But that near miss, that wasn't the end of it. It was more like a trigger. Within just hours, a major U.S. military response kicked in.
Yeah, it really feels like a turning point in this whole Red Sea situation.
So the big questions are, why now? Was this a deliberate message aimed straight at Washington? Or was it maybe a huge miscalculation by the Houthis?
That's really the core issue, isn't it? The intent. Were they trying to show off some new capability, some new level of resolve?
Or did they just completely misjudge how the U.S. would react to having one of its pilots targeted like that?
Given how fast and how forcefully the U.S. responded, you kind of lean towards the latter, don't you? That they perhaps didn't think it through.
Seems likely. And U.S. Central Command, CNN-TCOM, they didn't wait around. They confirmed the whole thing pretty quickly.
Yeah, their statement was quite clear. Both aircraft evaded, returned safely.
But let's just stress this again. You have the Houthis, technically a non-state group, showing they have the tech and the nerve to go after a top-tier American fighter jet.
That's a significant increase in their reach, their confidence. It changes the threat assessment.
Definitely.
And analysts are already digging into the missiles themselves. The thinking is they're likely Iranian-made, maybe modified Syad types, or perhaps the RAD series.
Which are designed for exactly this kind of target, right? Fast movers.
Precisely. These aren't like crude rockets. They're built to take down sophisticated aircraft.
Yeah.
Compare that to their usual targets. Saudi ships, commercial tankers, slower drones.
It's a different league entirely. A major escalation in ambition and obviously in the potential danger.
No question.
Okay, so the missiles miss. What happens right after that? Our sources paint a picture of immediate, substantial U.S. reaction.
Things wrapped up fast.
Naval warships in the area went straight to high alert. FA-18s were scrambled off a carrier nearby.
Standard procedure in some ways, but the speed suggests they took this very, very seriously.
And they really stepped up reconnaissance along the Yemen coast. More eyes, more ears. But crucially, it seems this incident gave the go-ahead, the green light for a direct U.S. response.
That green light part is key. It signals a shift from just defense, shooting down incoming threats to actually going after the source, proactive measures.
Which is a big shift for U.S. security interests in the region.
Definitely. It shows how seriously they viewed this specific attempt.
Now, the timeline and the intel behind this are pretty fascinating. They traced the launch back to mountains near Saada.
Which is a known Houthi stronghold, right, a logistics hub for them.
Exactly. And they suspect mobile launchers were used, which makes them harder to track, obviously.
Always a challenge.
But here's the tech angle. U.S. satellites apparently picked up the heat signatures, the missile tracks, almost instantly.
That rapid detection is vital.
And get this, that MQ-9 Reaper drone, our eye in the sky, it apparently got footage, the missile plume, the flash from the launch itself.
Critical evidence. That visual confirmation is gold for military planners, not just for immediate retaliation, but for understanding Houthi ops.
You need that proof, that targeting data. And the speed they gathered it is impressive. Satellites, drones, all working together.
It highlights the kind of advanced intel network the U.S. has in play there.
So they had the location, they had the confirmation, and the retaliation. Just as fast.
It doesn't take long at all.
By sunset, same day, just Hours after the F-16 evaded those missiles, U.S. forces were launching precision strikes into northern Yemen.
Wow, that is quick. What kind of strikes?
We're talking naval cruise missiles, likely Tomahawks, and possibly those F-A-18s that were scrambled earlier.
Hitting what specifically?
The suspected launch sites for those SA-6s, and also Houthi radar installations that might have helped guide them. Initial reports said targets neutralized.
So it wasn't just hitting back, it was degrading their ability to do it again.
Exactly, and sending a very loud message. This wasn't just tit for tat, it felt like a statement.
A statement addressing months of Houthi actions, right? Pushing boundaries, threatening shipping lanes.
Yeah, testing those red lines, and this time they crossed one. Firing on a U.S. jet was different. It gave the U.S., well, justification for a very public, very direct response.
And potentially to their backers as well, perhaps. Iran, notably.
That's often the implied audience too, isn't it? Now there's even a glimpse inside the U.S. Navy's Operations Center. On the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, really? What was that like?
Apparently, the moment those missiles were detected, the radio chatter just flipped from routine surveillance to active defense mode.
Instantly.
You can imagine the tension.
Fighter jets prepped, electronic warfare systems spun up, jamming confusing enemy radar, and strike packages put together incredibly fast.
Shows a high state of readiness.
And the word from the Pentagon was crystal clear. This attack could not go unanswered. By noon, they'd locked in the coordinates. Salada Province. Thanks to that satellite and drone intel.
The whole chain of command operating efficiently under pressure. It's what they trained for. Then, boom, around 4.2 of their local time, the strikes happened. Tomahawks launched from destroyers, the USS Laboon, USS Mason were mentioned, repositioned for this.
A long-range precision minimizes risk to pilots for that initial strike.
Plus, U.S. Air Force jets from an undisclosed base hit known Houthi radar sites too.
Taking out their eyes and ears. Smart.
CNTCOM's official line emphasized proportionate targeting. They stressed hitting only military assets directly linked to that attempted missile launch.
That language is important too. Proportionate. Signaling they want to punish the act, not necessarily start an all-out war, but still a firm response.
It absolutely marks a shift in U.S. posture there. Before this, it was mostly defensive, wasn't it?
Yeah, intercepting missiles, drones, escorting ships, issuing warnings, diplomatic pressure.
But this triggered a direct offensive response against Houthi infrastructure on Yemeni soil.
A significant change.
And the Navy's moving assets, too. The Eisenhower carrier group moving closer to Yemen, destroyers setting up missile defense zones. The whole threat level for U.S. crews has gone up.
It's a recalibration. From defense to a more proactive stance. Because the threat profile changed when they targeted that F-16. It shows commitment to defending U.S. forces and reacting if needed.
So what happened right after the U.S. strikes? Did the Houthis fire back?
Well, sources indicate no. No additional Houthi launches against U.S. assets in the following days.
Interesting. So maybe the message got through.
It seems that way, at least initially. And there are reports from intercepted intel, apparently, of confusion within the Houthi leadership. Internal debate.
Debate about what?
About whether targeting that F-16 was actually a, quote, massive mistake. Something that really changed the rules of the game.
So they realized they might have overplayed their hand, underestimated the U.S. reaction speed, maybe?
It certainly looks like it. Both the speed and the forcefulness probably surprised them.
And you mentioned the moral high ground earlier. Firing on commercial ships is one thing, internationally condemned, but different.
Right. Attacking a military jet, especially an American one, that strips away a lot of potential sympathy or calls for restraint from other nations. It gives the U.S. much clearer justification for its actions.
So, strategically, a big blunder for the Houthis. It seems like it exposed weaknesses to launch points' radar sites.
Definitely. And according to the source material, they've now become a direct priority for CNCOM, high-value targets.
Not just a nuisance, but a primary focus.
Which will undoubtedly impact their operations, command centers, movement, communications. They'll be under much more scrutiny and pressure.
It really did change the narrative, didn't it? Removed ambiguity about their intentions.
Absolutely. It provided a stronger basis for U.S. action, both at home and with allies.
And looking bigger picture, what does this mean for U.S. policy there? More action inside Yemen.
The sources suggest yes. Increased U.S. military activity. More satellite eyes, more focus on Houthi command structures, airfields, storage sites.
The previous administration already talked about taking all necessary actions to defend U.S. forces. This seems to cement that, maybe even push it further.
It looks like a shift in deterrence strategy, less about avoiding escalation at all costs, more towards... The source used the blunt phrase, "F around and find out."
Huh. Okay. A more proactive, maybe punitive deterrence?
Seems so. The initial impact was fewer Houthi launches, maybe some fear among their commanders. But it's a risky strategy too, isn't it?
Definitely. Potential for mistakes, unintended escalation, getting drawn deeper into the Yemen conflict. It's a fine line.
And the potential for civilian casualties is always a huge concern in these situations, something policymakers have to weigh very, very carefully.
What about the rest of the world? How did they react?
Pretty quickly, actually. After the Houthi missile launch, key U.S. allies stepped up. The UK, France, Germany, strong statements supporting the U.S. right to respond.
Any specifics?
Yeah, the British Ministry of Defense was quoted basically saying they stand with the U.S. on defending navigation freedom and deterring aggression. France mentioned adding more naval support through their EU mission, Operation ASPS.
So solid backing from European allies.
Yes, and even the UN, while publicly calling for restraint, apparently privately acknowledged the U.S. right to self-defense in this case. NATO also put out a statement condemning the Houthi escalation.
That unified front from allies is significant. It adds legitimacy to the U.S. response.
It really does. It reinforces the international consensus on maritime security and the unacceptability of targeting military assets like that.
So, summing up where things are now, Yemen's on edge. The Red Sea is undeniably a major flashpoint.
U.S. forces are on high alert.
Global trade is feeling the effects, and the whole world is kind of holding its breath, watching for the next move, because any misstep, as the source says, could really ignite something much bigger.
It just highlights how volatile the whole region is right now. The decisions made after this F-16 incident are going to have ripple effects for a long time.
Okay, let's just quickly recap the main points for everyone. A Houthi missile launch against a U.S. F-16 over the Red Sea,
which thankfully missed.
Followed by a very swift, very decisive U.S. retaliatory strike on Houthi missile launchers and radar sites in Yemen.
Marking a clear escalation and a definite shift in the dynamics over there. The whole calculus changed.
And the key takeaway for you listening is really about that Houthi miscalculation. Targeting that U.S. fighter jet gave the U.S. the justification and maybe the push it needed to adopt a much more aggressive stance.
With immediate consequences and potentially very far-reaching ones for the conflict.
Which leads us to the final thought for you to chew on. Given how fast and how forcefully the U.S. reacted this time, what do you think the long-term implications really are for stability in the region and for America's future military role in the Middle East?
Yeah, that's the big question moving forward. Lots to think about there.